Good morning again, ladies and gents. Moving today's meetup along, we will be introducing today's guest speaker, and I'm delighted that Sally Orange will be joining us. I'll invite Sally up shortly, but just to set some context about Sally's background, as I say, she's a military veteran, over 20 years service. She's the UK's female national ambassador for the Army Cadets. Completed as an endurance athlete, she's completed some of the world's toughest challenges. Over 50 marathons to date, multiple Guinness World Record holder. She's the only person in the planet to run a marathon on every continent in fancy dress. So, as well as that, she swam the English Channel, cycled across New Zealand, cycled across the USA, also completed the infamous Marathon des Sables, which is often coined the world's toughest race. That's definitely made me feel extremely lazy and put my 5K that I did this morning to shame. I'll invite Sally up onto the stage, up onto the screen.
Good morning.
Hi, Sally. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. As I said, you've made me feel very lazy.
You've done 5K this morning. I'm impressed.
Well, it's a minuscule achievement compared to what you've done. I will just mention that if anyone has any questions for Sally as we're going through the conversation, on the right-hand side, along from the chat, you'll see a Q&A area. Please do add anything in there and I'll pick it up as we go, and if it's relevant to the point in time in the conversation, or I'll save it for after. But Sally, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll get into it. I've said a little bit of context about what you do, and we'll start with your military background and talk about what your service involved and where it took you.
Yeah, as I say, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. First off, so yeah, I served for almost 22 years in the Royal Army Medical Corps as a physiotherapist. So I, was very fortunate, travelled all over the world. Did actually serve in Afghanistan on operations there, which was at the field hospital in Camp Bastion, but also sort of travelling around to some of the forward operating bases and some of the other places. So I was very fortunate. I was the officer in command of the Defence Medical Rehabilitation team out there, the deployed team out there, and yeah, saw some horrific things, some incredible things, I would probably say it was a highlight of my career. And I know that sounds quite strange, but I think the advance in medicine that we did see over there, and people working together, and people that really probably should never have surviving, and not only surviving, but going on to live very fulfilling lives. So yeah, that part of it. And then I was also very lucky with adventure training to literally go all over the world, climbing mountains, diving in oceans, kayaking, skiing. I really did sort of embrace all of that, but unfortunately was medically discharged in November last year, which was something that I hadn't wanted and hadn't well, I sort of knew it was coming, but my mental health had suffered. Not actually, a lot of people then make the assumption that is due to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, because of the things that I saw. But in actual fact, that was the time that made me feel, that I had most use and most purpose, really. But it was, I unfortunately suffer with quite severe depression and anxiety, and it just came to a point where it was felt that the military wasn't the right place for me. So yeah, a little bit of background for things.
No, thank you, and I can already see where the link to all your challenges and the physical activity is coming in. But just a quick mention of the ambassador role for the Army Cadets. You're the UK's female ambassador for the Army Cadets. What does that role entail?
Yeah, I mean, an absolutely huge privilege to have been asked in January this year, and I think actually it's probably helping with my transition out of the military, because it's something that I didn't want to do, to still be able to wear a uniform, and to be able to represent and to inspire young people to achieve. That's the motto of the Army Cadets, is to inspire to achieve. And they've brought on this ambassador program to you know, the thing is though, with inspiration, I don't feel that it's always me inspiring others. There's so many of the cadets that inspire me with what they've been able to do and achieve, and particularly during, you know, during lockdown. So what we have done over there's three ambassadors and a champion as well, and we've sort of online tried to do sort of, you know, Q&A sessions. We've got some exciting plans coming in the future, which is really going to engage and embrace some of the things that I am very passionate about. So mental health, and mental health particularly in young people, and just getting people talking about it. So it's a real privilege, and, you know, a great, what I consider to be a real responsibility as well, because I do feel that with privilege comes responsibility. So yeah, you know, a fantastic opportunity as well as an honor as well.
Yeah, and we'll go into to talk about the mental health side of things, and we spoke yesterday, and I think it's a big topic, and rightly so, particularly in the business world as well, with so many people feeling distant and remote, and obviously the obvious challenges going on. But let's talk a little bit about the challenges. I listed a few there. How did that all start, and what was the initial thought process through putting yourself through those challenges, and how has it evolved to get to where it is now?
Do you know, it's quite funny that you asked that, because actually fear was some of the things that stopped me doing a lot of things, and it started back in 2007, or I mean, I could even say it started back in 1981 when I watched the first London Marathon, and I remember thinking then, I'd love to do that one day, that looks amazing, you know, I'd really want to do it. But it took years and years and years before I actually plucked up the courage to think, maybe I could do that, because all that time I thought, I could never do that. I could never raise the money for a charity place. You know, the distance to run. There was just so many. I wouldn't be able to do that. You know, everybody else had. I suppose I made excuses. Everybody else had the opportunities, or, you know, they perhaps fundraising opportunities were better. So I think that's probably where it first sparked from, of thinking. And I actually did that first marathon dressed as a superhero, so to try and help with raising money. And I did actually get the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a superhero. But I think the more important thing was that for the first time ever, I kind of felt like a superhero. I crossed the finish line and I was like, wow, that, you know, that was incredible. That was electric. And I say that a few minutes later, I did think, never again, never in my life. But, you know, again, why would I put myself through that? But, you know, I mean, I don't have children, but people say with childbirth, it's the same, that you soon forget that and you start thinking, well, you know, I want to get that feeling again. So I set myself the next marathon, and I decided, you know, I'd already raised quite a lot of money for charity, that I needed to do something bigger and better. So I looked at thinking outside the box, and I thought, I'll use my surname and run as an orange, and I got the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a piece of fruit. So yeah, and it sort of, you know, went on from there. When I was in Afghanistan, it was my third marathon, and I thought, you know what, I'll run a marathon here. I dressed as a banana, and ran around Camp Bastion dressed as a banana. So it kind of evolved from there. And I've always loved traveling, and yeah, and then just different opportunities came up, and I thought, why not? There's always reasons to think I can't do things, but unless you push the boundaries, it's amazing what your mind and your body can achieve. And, you know, something like the Marathon des Sables, that it's six and a half marathons in 7 days across the Sahara Desert, carrying all your own kit. And I must admit, I had a lot of people thinking that I couldn't do it. I'd have people say, I know Marines who've tried to do that, and I'm certainly not the fastest, I'm not the fittest, and that's what I try and show really with the pieces of fruit, that you don't have to be the fastest or the fittest, but if you can go out, enjoy yourself, make others smile, raise money, and sort of encompassing the mental health thing. People often ask me why. They'll ask me why I'm dressed as a piece of fruit, and it's become a great way to talk about mental health, because I explain, you know, I'm raising awareness for mental health, which often then sparks a conversation whereby they'll explain maybe they or somebody they know has had a problem. And so it's just a really small way of,
Mm.
otherwise I don't think people would normally talk about mental health. So that's sort of where it, where it evolved from. And yeah, with the fruit theme came on, and then last year I did actually run the London Marathon and got the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a nut. Because everybody always says you're completely nuts, and I thought, you know what, embrace it. So I had a sign on me that said "Nuts about mental health. Together we can crack it," and got the mental health message into the Guinness Book of Records, which is something I'm very proud of as well.
Fantastic. And I've read a lot about the fundraising efforts that you've done, and lost count about the amount of money that you've raised, but it's a fantastic amount. So congratulations. And we'll talk about the sort of mindset, particularly when you're going into some of these challenges, and how you're using it to raise awareness of mental health. And perhaps if you could share a little bit about your experience in that, and really how you combat against or keeping your mental health in good condition. And also, perhaps a secondary question would be, you're obviously very physically fit, but would you say that mental fitness over physical fitness is more important, particularly in life and business, and even your sports and challenges?
Yeah, but really, really great questions there. I think I mentioned that I'd had my own difficulties with severe depression and anxiety, and although I really did hit rock bottom, and for weeks on end felt there was no place on this earth for me, no purpose for me, that I was a burden to so many people, and a very, very difficult time, very negative mindset, and as I say, difficult time. But I now use that as when I'm doing the endurance events, of thinking, actually, whatever event I'm doing, it's not as bad as how I felt at that time. So again, it's almost using a negative and turning it into a positive. I'm not saying that everybody should have a really dark and difficult time, but I think everybody probably could think of a dark and difficult time. It would be a different spectrum of, we're all very different, but I do believe that we all have difficulties with our mental health. And again, we're different, and that will be different for everybody. But sort of moving on to the second part of your question, certainly being a physiotherapist, physical activity and movement and physical health has always been something, for 20 years, that's what my bread and butter has been. And I will prescribe exercises to patients to keep them physically fit. And if I have somebody with a back injury, I will say, you're probably going to need to do these exercises for the rest of your life, to remain mobile and to remain active. And I think it's a long way, it's sort of lagging behind, but the thought process really should be exactly the same for our mental fitness, in that we do need to do exercises for our brain. It's almost like doing physiotherapy for the brain. And I think if that concept could be understood, we'll go to the gym for our physical health, but we also know that our physical health has an impact on our mental health. So businesses, if you're able to go, I was very lucky with the military with this, that in a lunchtime, if you're able to go to the gym or go outside, go for a walk, it has a much bigger impact on productivity in the afternoon, because you're energized. But all too often we can think, I can't take that time away from the desk, I should be carrying on with that email, I'll just eat my sandwich at the desk. And I think the recent situation in lockdown has probably you really have to be structured and disciplined in thinking, I've got to get out, I've got to do something. And that's not always easy. I can honestly say I'm not a great, I struggle with motivation. I struggle with that concept, even though I know it's true. I know that I'll feel better out of it after it. And I can honestly say that the hardest thing often is getting out of the front door. So you say this morning you've only done 5k. I actually look at it the other way and think, you have done 5k. That's more than I've done. Although I did actually do some breathing exercises, so I'm not going to be too hard, not too hard on myself, because I'm now trying to look at, I do seem to have the physical endurance. I don't do a huge amount of training, but yeah, it's looking at, I can honestly say that there's many a time that I've regretted not going for a run, but I've never been for a run and regretted going for it. And
Mm.
I think that's something that I always have in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I definitely like the analogy of the brain and the mind as a muscle. Like you think your biceps, your chest. I hear that quite a lot through my brother and his association with as a yoga instructor and things like that. My other question would be for any advice or any particularly for businesses that are that have got employees that may be struggling, or just even things to consider or tips of advice around managing mental health. What do you use, or what have you seen work well with others that perhaps they could take away from this?
I mean, I feel that I'm constantly learning with this, and I'm still not there with my mental health. I still have struggles, and I still have dips, but some of it is actually being kind to yourself and recognizing I am a human being, the same as all of us. We can't get everything right all of the time, and I certainly know for me, the lack of compassion to myself is something that I've struggled with. I almost have a default setting of looking after other people and looking out for other people, and it's looking at we can give compassion to others, we can receive compassion, and we can give compassion to ourselves. Now, most of us are good at doing it for others. We're not so good at receiving it from others, but giving it to ourselves is something that I think very few or most of us would admit that we struggle of that out of the three. So that's something that I'm really at the moment trying to work on with as well as sort of breathing and the slower things in life, and that's more of a challenge than me than a marathon is. I can think tomorrow I'll go and run a marathon. It wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't be fast, it wouldn't it wouldn't break any records, but that's a much easier mindset for me than for me to think, right, be kind to yourself. So yeah, I think that's probably one of we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I think particularly during this time that the internet is fantastic and social media is fantastic, but there's also a lot of comparison, and that can make us feel that we're not doing as well, we're not doing as good. And that can be detrimental, whereas actually if you're just in your own bubble and living your own life, you know what you're doing, you know what your own goals are. So yeah, it's being kind to yourself, really. As one thing.
No, absolutely. Bringing it forward to today, and I will mention that you were involved at the London Nightingale Hospital working on the front line, and even on the day of the London Marathon, Sally ran a marathon around London Nightingale Hospital, which is a feat in itself. What was your involvement with Nightingale, and how did that come around?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd worked in the NHS years before I'd actually joined the military, and obviously I've been medically discharged and had got plans that were to go off and do lots of different adventures all over the world, which got stopped. And I do have the physical capability. I'm not I'm not physically vulnerable, and so I wanted to go back to the NHS. And again, fear was quite a big thing, not of the virus, but it was more the environment of how would I get on with other people. And actually the Nightingale Hospital really suited me in that it was almost like a field hospital again. Everybody would be coming together, mucking in on something. They wouldn't know their roles particularly, but it would be a case of mucking in. And I think it was probably the military mindset that made me think the Nightingale was the hospital, was the route for me. I went and did the training, and as you say, on the weekend, it was the London Marathon. My training was on the Friday and the Monday, so I thought I'll grab a pair of scrubs, a face mask, and run and raise money for the charity. And what I did with that marathon is I every mile of that marathon I dedicated it to an NHS worker, and just wanted to thank them for their service of what they were doing. And yeah, managed to raise amount. But unfortunately, I did the rest of the training, and then I say unfortunately, a lot of negativity about the fact that they hadn't been used. It's an absolutely massive positive.
Of course.
It wasn't required. So yeah, I haven't been used, but I'm trained up if there is a second spike or if there's any requirement in the future.
Sure. A couple of we'll get a couple of questions from the audience, and we'll try and rattle through these quick. Firstly, kind of leads on from what I asked, but what tips would you give to people who are suffering, to help someone who is suffering from anxiety or depression? Maybe a couple of tidbits that you could suggest.
Yeah, things that I've sort of learned is a gratitude journal. So almost every day, we're very good at looking at the negatives, and we can have 10 positives and one negative, and we'll focus on that negative. But it's really trying to see the positives, and 10 is a lot to think of. So just 3 each day before going to bed of just thinking, actually, and some days, I mean, some days when I'm really not very good, that the most positive thing that I've done is get out of bed. I might not have managed a shower, I might not have managed a meal, but I've got out of bed, and I'm breathing. So there's a real spectrum of, I could have run a marathon, or I've got out of bed, and that probably sounds strange that I can. I think people often think I'm mega motivated. I'm not, and that's why actually the events help me, because it's a goal. I set myself goals, and some days it is being kind to yourself and say today's not a marathon day. It is just eat 3 meals, or go for a walk, or and also with those goals is making them small and achievable. So and sometimes if you haven't achieved that full goal, still recognizing that you've gone part way towards that goal. So it's always, the mind can be very tricky, and that's what I call my brain. I call it a tricky brain, because a lot of the different therapies that I've had, because it's not my friend, and I would never speak to somebody else the way that my brain speaks to me. And it's often looking at, in a situation, how would I speak to my friend if they had found themselves in that same situation? And I think that's just a way that we can all recognize how we would treat somebody else, and maybe not ourselves. And it's a shame that it's not a default setting that we can be so kind, that we could be kind to ourselves.
Yeah, that's a really good outlook. Very good perspective, and a couple of things to think about. Marlena O'Donnell asks, what's the biggest challenge you've overcome?
I would probably say my mental health, but I don't feel that I've overcome it yet. As I say, I think it's constantly evolving. And the difficulty I have is quite often I come across as very lively, very bubbly, and I almost see myself as a Robin Williams type person, that people think you would never ever get down, and that's because I don't let many people see me when I'm not in that great place, because I recognize that we talk about drains, heaters and radiators and drains, and I do feel a burden when I'm being negative, but it's almost trying to help yourself get out of that negativity. Do need support of others and do need professional help sometimes, and I am still ongoing with that, and I'll be honest about that. And it's only within the last year that I've been open. I've probably struggled for about 13-14 years, so I know that I'm not there yet. I still have a long way to go, so it probably seems a different answer to what people might think. They might think it's climbing the biggest mountain, and I've managed to do that, and I'm proud of that. But I think it's the journey of trying to overcome my mental health difficulties, really.
Sure. And I'm just conscious of the time, and this has been great because your answers have been so thorough that we haven't been able to get around to everyone. And I just want to ask, and I think you'll stay around afterwards if anyone has any questions, which is great. What's next for you, Sally? What challenges have you got coming up?
Well, physical challenges. A lot have been stopped. I was due to be running 10 marathons in 10 days across Iceland, dressed as vegetables, because I'm using the fruit and vegetable things to inspire young people, and it's a really colourful and visual thing. And I'm actually now sort of putting that into a book, that I'm looking at, using my experiences and looking at the impact that healthy eating, physical activity and mental health all have on each other, and it's a book that hopefully will be appealing. I like my fruit joke. appealing to both young and old, because it's 7 continents. Antarctica was incredible. Little recipes in there. Children, as I say, there's visuals, and just the goal setting, and overcoming sort of different fears that people may have, that I still have, but actually prove that we're normal and human beings.
Sure.
So I'm not some, I drink my glass of wine before doing Ironman or whatever. So I'm a very normal human being.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people will take comfort in that, knowing that you do that. So there's hope for us all. There's hope.
For any Ironman, it's a ritual.
Yeah.
7 Ironmans, but I make sure I have a glass of wine the night before. That's my strap line. You've got to have a glass of wine the night before.
Fantastic. Sally, we're just out of time now, but delighted that you're able to stick around. So I'm glad that people will be able to see and speak to you on the tables as we go. But I'll take you off the screen now. But thanks very much, Sally.
Thank you very much.
Sally Orange, ladies and gents. Thank you.